Before we dive into tonight's haunting story, be sure to like and subscribe, or you may find yourself wondering if something is watching you. Hit that button if you dare. The air was thick with moisture as I hiked through the dense forest, my boots sinking slightly into the soft earth with every step. It was early autumn, and though the trees had begun to shed their leaves, the forest still felt alive, every corner filled with the whispers of nature. I had always loved hiking alone. It gave me a chance to clear my mind, think things over, and find peace in the solitude of the woods. But that day was different. I had taken the trail less traveled, a decision I quickly regretted. The deeper I went into the woods, the more oppressive the silence became. No birds sang, no animals scurried through the underbrush. Even the usual rustling of the wind seemed to have stilled, replaced by an unnatural quiet that hung over everything. The trees, their trunks twisted and gnarled, seemed to loom over me, their branches clawing at the gray sky, blocking out most of the sunlight. It felt like I was walking through a place forgotten by time. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks. I had been on countless hikes before, and it was nothing new to feel a little uneasy. But this felt different. My heart was beating faster than it should have, my eyes darting from one shadow to the next. Every creak of the trees, every snap of a twig felt amplified in the silence, as if the woods themselves were watching me. I could almost hear the faintest whisper, like someone calling my name, but every time I turned around, there was nothing but the oppressive forest surrounding me. After a few hours of walking deeper into the woods, I decided to stop and rest. I found a small clearing, the ground soft with moss and fallen leaves. I pulled out my water bottle and sat down on a large rock, trying to calm my nerves. I knew I was overthinking it. There was no reason to be afraid, but even as I told myself that, a chill ran down my spine. Something was wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I stood up abruptly, my heart hammering in my chest. There, just at the edge of the clearing, I saw movement. It was brief, a flicker in the corner of my vision, but it was enough to send my pulse into overdrive. I squinted into the shadows, trying to make out what I had seen. There was nothing there, just trees and underbrush. I breathed a sigh of relief, shaking my head. I had been out here too long. I needed to get back to the main trail before it got dark. I grabbed my pack and turned to leave, but as I did, something stopped me. A sound, a low, guttural growl. I froze. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a bear or a wolf. It was something else entirely. The sound seemed to come from all directions at once, reverberating through the trees, closing in on me. My mind raced as I spun around, searching for the source of the sound. That's when I saw it. A figure standing just outside the clearing. It was tall, impossibly tall, its form obscured by the trees. I couldn't make out any details, but its outline was unmistakable. A figure that was human, but not quite. Its arms were too long, its legs too thin. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, as if it were looking at me, but from a place that didn't belong to the world I knew. I should have run. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to flee, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by fear, staring at the figure as it took a slow step forward, its feet barely touching the ground. I could hear the crackling of leaves beneath its weight, but it didn't sound right to hollow, too wrong. And then it spoke. Its voice was a rasping whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You shouldn't have come here." The words were like a punch to the gut. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin. I tried to speak, to ask it who or what it was, but my throat was dry, my mouth numb. The figure moved again, and this time I could see its face. Or, at least, I think I saw its face. It was featureless, just a smooth, pale surface that seemed to stretch and shift like the surface of water. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, were deep, hollow pits, dark and endless. There was no emotion, no humanity behind them, just an emptiness that threatened to swallow me whole. I don't remember how I moved. One moment I was standing there, frozen, and the next, I was running. My legs burned as I pushed myself harder than I ever had before, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I had no idea where I was going, just away from that thing. The trees blurred past me as I crashed through the underbrush, my limbs scraped by branches and thorns. I didn't care, I just had to get away. But no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't escape the feeling of something following me. The sound of footsteps, not mine, echoing just behind me. The growl was closer now, louder, more distinct. I dared not look back, afraid of what I would see, but I could feel it closing in. The figure, whatever it was was getting closer. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I stumbled onto the main trail. My heart was pounding in my chest, my legs barely holding me up. I looked around, half expecting to see the figure step out from the shadows, but there was nothing, just the silence of the woods, still and oppressive. I didn't stop, I didn't even slow down. I kept running, the path winding through the forest, the trees still closing in around me. I could hear my breath, my footsteps, but no longer the growl. I dared a glance behind me, and for just a second, I thought I saw something moving among the trees. But when I blinked, it was gone. By the time I made it to the edge of the forest, the sun was beginning to set. The light was fading fast, and I knew I couldn't stay in the woods any longer. I didn't care if I was far from my car. I didn't care if I was lost. I just needed to leave. I've never gone back to those woods. I've never even driven by them again. Every time I think about it, I can still hear that growl, that whisper. You shouldn't have come here. Something in those woods, something that isn't human, was waiting for me, and I barely escaped. I don't know what it was, and I don't want to. All I know is that I'm never hiking through those woods again. There are places in this world where you don't belong, and those woods, they weren't meant for me. The sun had barely begun to rise when I set out on my solo hike. The forest was calm, bathed in the soft orange light of early morning. It was a familiar place, one I had visited many times before. The path was narrow, winding through dense woods that seemed to hold their secrets close. There was something peaceful about it, something I could never quite explain, a connection to the earth that I didn't get in my everyday life. But this time was different. I had been planning this hike for weeks. I needed to get away, clear my mind, and find some peace. My life had become cluttered with noise work, relationships, all the things that weighed me down. I thought the solitude of the forest would help me find clarity. I took my first steps into the woods. The air cooled against my skin. The ground beneath my boots was soft, covered in layers of leaves from last fall. The trees stood tall and proud, their branches stretching high into the sky, creating a canopy that filtered the sunlight. I breathed in deeply, feeling the crisp morning air fill my lungs, the earthy scent of moss and pine needles surrounding me. As I walked, the silence of the woods enveloped me. It was the kind of silence that made you feel as though the world had disappeared, leaving you alone with your thoughts. But something about the stillness felt wrong, like the air itself was thick with tension. My footsteps echoed unnaturally loud in the emptiness, and my heart began to race for no apparent reason. I told myself it was just nerves. I had been hiking alone for years, and there was no reason to be afraid now. The path before me was quiet, empty. The only sounds were the occasional rustle of leaves underfoot, and the soft chirping of distant birds. But then I heard it, a snap, sharp and loud, coming from somewhere deep in the forest. My heart skipped a beat. It could have been a deer or a squirrel, maybe even a falling branch. I told myself not to overthink it, but the silence that followed the sound felt heavy, like something was waiting in the shadows. I paused for a moment, my breath catching in my throat. The woods around me seemed to hold their breath too. I looked around, but the trees were still, the path empty. There was no sign of movement, nothing to explain the sound. My feet started moving again, but now, every step felt heavier. The deeper I went into the forest, the more uncomfortable I became. The woods had always been a place of solace, but today, they felt like a maze, an endless stretch of trees, with no clear end in sight. The path ahead was now barely visible, swallowed up by the thick underbrush. Another snap, this time, closer. I froze, my heart pounding. My mind raced, conjuring images of wild animals, or perhaps someone else on the trail, but I couldn't see anything. There was no one around, no movement, just the trees and the oppressive silence. I couldn't explain it, but I felt watched, as if eyes were following me from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to make themselves known. I pushed forward, my pace quickening, but the sense of unease grew stronger with every step. The air was colder now, and the sunlight had begun to fade, obscured by thick clouds that had rolled in overhead. The sky darkened, and the once peaceful forest now seemed hostile. The trees closed in around me, their gnarled branches twisting like fingers reaching for me, as if the forest itself was trying to trap me. A cold wind swept through the trees, carrying with it a strange whispering sound. It wasn't the wind, it was something else, something that didn't belong. I turned quickly, trying to locate the source of the noise, but there was nothing. Only the trees, only the shadows. And then I saw it, a figure, standing at the edge of the path, just out of sight. I blinked, unsure of what I had seen, but when I looked again, it was gone. My heart began to race again, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. There was something in the woods with me. I wasn't alone. I pushed on, my breath quickening, my mind spiraling with thoughts of what I had just seen. Maybe it was a person, a fellow hiker, but why had they been standing so still, just watching me? Why hadn't they moved when I looked? My thoughts were a jumble as I tried to rationalize it, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The path started to narrow even more, and I found myself stumbling over roots and rocks, the underbrush thickening around me. I could barely make out the way forward now. I pulled out my phone, hoping for some signal, but the screen was blank. No service. I cursed under my breath. Of course, this would happen. I should have turned back when I had the chance, but there was no turning back now, not with the forest feeling like it was closing in on me. I pressed on, hoping to find my way out. The whispering sounds grew louder, and I could feel the presence of something just behind me. I didn't dare look. My legs were trembling, but I forced myself to keep moving, telling myself it was all in my head. But the more I tried to convince myself, the stronger the feeling became. I heard a footstep. It wasn't mine. I whipped around, heart racing, but there was nothing. No figure, no sign of movement, just the empty path, the silent trees. Yet the feeling of being watched intensified. I wasn't alone. Panic set in as I realized I had no idea where I was anymore. The forest seemed to stretch on forever, the path now a tangled mess of roots and fallen branches. I was lost. I had to get out. I had to find my way back. But the deeper I went, the more distorted everything became. The trees seemed to loom larger, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. The whispering was no longer distant. It was right behind me, close enough to make my skin crawl. And then I saw it again, the figure. This time, it wasn't standing at the edge of the path. It was directly in front of me, a tall, dark shape obscured by the shadows. Its face was pale, featureless, and its eyes were hollow, endless pits, black and soulless. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I could only stare as the figure took a slow step toward me, its limbs too long, too wrong. I tried to turn and run, but my legs wouldn't move. My body felt frozen, trapped in place by the figure's gaze. Its mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural grin, and it whispered something I couldn't understand. I don't remember how I escaped. I don't remember running, but somehow I found my way back to the main trail. The path was clearer now, but the feeling of being watched, of something following me, never left. I made it out of the forest just as the sun began to set. My heart was still racing, my mind spinning with the images of the figure, the whispers, and the cold presence in the woods. But the strangest part, I never told anyone about what happened. I couldn't, because the one thing that terrified me the most, I don't think I was the only one on that trail that day. The wind was bitter as it cut through the tall pines, howling like a distant wolf. I had always loved hiking, but this time, as I walked deeper into the woods, something felt off. The air felt too thick, too heavy, and the further I ventured into the forest, the more the trees seemed to close in around me. It was a bright autumn day, but the sun barely filtered through the dense canopy above. The forest, once so familiar, felt foreign, as if it had changed overnight. The crunch of my boots against the dry leaves beneath my feet seemed louder than usual, too loud. The peacefulness I had come here for was slipping away, replaced by an eerie quiet. I had been planning this solo hike for weeks. I had heard the trail was beautiful this time of year, and despite a few warnings from friends about getting lost, I was determined to go. I told myself that it was just a hike, just a chance to get away and clear my mind. But even now, as I walked a narrow trail, I could feel the weight of something watching me, lurking just outside my line of sight. The first few miles were uneventful. The path was winding but manageable, and I soon lost myself in the rhythm of walking. But something strange started to happen. The further I went, the less I remembered why I had come here. My thoughts started to scatter like leaves in the wind, and I found myself wondering if this was truly where I had intended to go. The deeper I hiked, the more the world around me began to feel unfamiliar. I was still on the trail, but the landscape felt different, distorted. I paused to take a swig from my water bottle and glanced around. The trees seemed older here, gnarled and twisted, their branches reaching out like crooked fingers. The ground was uneven, and the path had all but disappeared, swallowed by underbrush and fallen branches. I tried to shake the uneasy feeling creeping into my chest. This was just a forest, right? Just a beautiful stretch of wilderness. There was no reason to feel ... trapped. But then I heard it, a rustling in the bushes, followed by the unmistakable snap of a twig. My head whipped around, heart hammering in my chest. There was no one there. Nothing but the wind whispering through the trees. I forced myself to take a deep breath, laughing nervously. It was just a deer or a squirrel, just nature doing its thing. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Every time I looked over my shoulder, the woods seemed a little darker, the shadows stretching longer than they should. I could hear movement, soft but deliberate, just behind me. Each time I quickened my pace, the rustling seemed to grow louder, closer. I spun around once more, expecting to catch a glimpse of some wild animal, but again there was nothing, just trees, just silence. My breath became shallow as I pressed on, my steps growing faster. The feeling of being watched was suffocating now, and I couldn't get rid of the sensation that something was wrong. My instincts were screaming at me to turn back, but I had already come so far. Surely it was nothing. Just the usual feeling you get when you're alone in the woods, right? Just paranoia. That's when I saw it. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, a figure, standing perfectly still just off the trail. I froze, squinting into the underbrush. The figure was tall, unnaturally so, and seemed to blend into the shadows, its features distorted and blurred by the trees. It was as if it wasn't quite there, like it was part of the forest itself. I blinked, and the figure was gone, vanished into the dark spaces between the trees. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. My body was frozen in place, my pulse pounding in my ears. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. But the woods were silent once again, the air thick with tension. The wind stopped, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, I heard a voice. It was soft, barely audible over the wind that had picked up again. A whisper, barely more than a breath, drifting through the trees. Get out. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My eyes scanned the forest, desperate for some sign of safety, but all I saw were the twisted trees and the endless shadows. The air felt suffocating, oppressive. The whispering grew louder, and I realized it was coming from all directions, from every corner of the forest. Get out, or you'll never leave. I turned, my legs finally moving, and I began to run. My feet pounded against the uneven ground as I pushed through the underbrush, branches slapping against my face and arms. My breath came in ragged gasps, my heart thundering in my chest as I sprinted down the trail. But every time I glanced back, the figure was there, just behind me, moving silently through the trees. I tried to follow the path, but it was disappearing beneath me, the trail growing more tangled, more elusive, as if the forest itself was closing in, shifting, trapping me. My mind raced. How had I gotten so far in? Where was the way back? The woods felt endless now, the path unrecognizable. The feeling of being hunted, of being pursued by something not human, crawled under my skin. Then I saw it again, the figure, this time much closer, standing at the edge of the trail. Its eyes, if you could call them eyes, were hollow, dark voids, deep enough to swallow everything around them. Its face was pale, featureless, save for a thin, twisted smile that stretched unnaturally wide. It stepped forward, its movements jerky, as if it was struggling to maintain its form. My body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed, rooted to the spot as the figure slowly advanced, its smile growing wider with each step. The air grew colder, the shadows darker. I felt the pull of something deep within the forest, something ancient, something that didn't belong. The smile twisted further, and the figure spoke, its voice like the cracking of dead wood. You shouldn't have come. In that instant, something snapped inside me. The fear, the paralysis, shattered, and I turned and ran with every ounce of strength in me. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The woods were alive, alive with something that I couldn't understand. I ran blindly, crashing through the underbrush, branches and roots trying to trip me, to hold me in place. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I don't remember how long I ran. My legs were numb, my lungs burning for air, but I didn't care. I had to escape. Finally, I burst out of the trees and into a clearing. I looked back, gasping for breath, but there was nothing. No figure, no whispering, just the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just ran straight back to the parking lot, to my car. I didn't stop running until I was safely behind the wheel, the door locked, the engine roaring to life. But as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling, that presence, the eyes, the smile. I knew, deep down, that whatever I had seen in those woods, it wasn't something that would let me go so easily. It was still out there, somewhere, watching, waiting. And I couldn't help but wonder, was I truly alone when I left? The wind was sharp as I set off, the late afternoon sunlight already fading behind the dense canopy of trees. The forest trail ahead of me was familiar, but something felt different today. Maybe it was the isolation. My usual hiking buddies had backed out last minute, and I'd decided to go alone. Or perhaps it was the strange feeling I'd had all day, as though I were being watched. I'd shaken it off at first, but the unease stuck with me as I walked deeper into the woods. I had always enjoyed the peace of the forest, the quiet, the way the trees whispered in the wind. But now, every snap of a twig beneath my feet made me jump. Every rustle in the bushes made my pulse quicken. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks, but the dread kept creeping in, an invisible hand tightening around my chest. The path was narrow, overgrown with ivy and roots that threatened to trip me with every step. I glanced at my watch. Only an hour before sunset. I should have turned around, but the trail was too enticing. The promise of a quiet view from the ridge just a little further ahead. I continued onward, pushing through the thick underbrush. It wasn't long before I noticed something strange. The sounds of the forest, the birds, the wind, the occasional squirrel skittering through the leaves had all disappeared. An unnatural silence hung in the air. I paused, looking around, trying to catch my breath. The air felt thick, too thick for a forest this time of year. My heart raced, and I could feel a drop in temperature, despite the fact that it was still late afternoon. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog in my mind. There was nothing out here but trees. I was being ridiculous, and yet, a knot of fear twisted in my stomach, gnawing at me from the inside. That's when I heard it. A rustling sound, not from the trees, but from behind me. I spun around, my heart nearly leaping out of my chest. My breath hitched in my throat as I scanned the dimming woods. Nothing. No movement, no figures, no animals. I strained my eyes, hoping for some sign of life, but the path behind me was empty. I wasn't alone. A cold sweat broke out on my neck as I began walking faster. My senses heightened. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Every crackle of the dry leaves beneath my feet seemed amplified, every distant snap of a branch louder. I couldn't help but feel that someone or something was trailing me. I quickened my pace, trying to shake the feeling, but it clung to me, suffocating. The path seemed longer now, the trees closer, like they were leaning in, watching, waiting. The light was fading fast. I needed to find a place to camp for the night. There was a small clearing up ahead where I usually set up, and I moved toward it with urgency, hoping to set up quickly and settle my nerves. The forest seemed darker now, as if the trees had crowded in, blocking out what little light remained. When I reached the clearing, my breath caught in my throat. There, in the center of the small open space, was something I didn't expect to see. A figure, a man, standing perfectly still, staring at me with empty eyes. I froze, unable to look away. He was tall, his body hidden in shadows, his face obscured by a hood. I couldn't see his features clearly, but there was something unsettling about the way he stood, unnaturally still, unnervingly silent. It was as if he had been waiting for me, waiting to be seen. The air turned cold, the forest now completely silent. I couldn't hear my heartbeat, though I knew it was pounding in my chest. My body screamed at me to turn and run, but my feet wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Finally, the figure moved. It wasn't a smooth motion, more like a jerk, an unnatural mechanical movement. He took a single step forward, and then another. His eyes, those dark voids beneath the hood, never left me. "Why are you here?" The voice came out like a rasp, as though it hadn't been used in years. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. I wasn't sure what to say, or even if I should speak at all. I could feel the weight of the question pressing down on me. My throat tightened. I was just hiking, I stammered, my voice shaking. I didn't mean to intrude. I'm sorry. The figure tilted his head slightly, his movement jerky and unnatural, as though his body was struggling to maintain its shape. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and guttural. "Not everyone who comes here leaves." I didn't understand what he meant, but my instincts were screaming at me. This wasn't just a man, this was something else, something that didn't belong in the woods, something that didn't belong in this world. Without thinking, my legs finally obeyed, and I turned to run. I bolted, not looking back, my breath ragged as I plunged deeper into the woods. The branches scratched at my skin, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away from him, from whatever he was. I don't know how long I ran, but I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the forest. The path was clearer now, and the moon was rising, casting pale light across the ground. I collapsed, my legs trembling beneath me, my heart still pounding in my chest. As I lay there, gasping for breath, I realized with a cold shiver that I was not alone. The figure was there, standing at the tree line, watching me. But this time, there was no movement, no more jerky steps, just silence. I didn't know if I was still in the forest, or if the forest was inside me now. The figure's hollow eyes still stared into me, even though I couldn't see them anymore. Even though I couldn't hear him, I knew he was still there, waiting. I didn't stay to see what he would do next. I ran, faster this time, until I reached my car, locked the doors, and drove away, my mind reeling. But the strange thing, I haven't stopped hearing his voice. His words keep echoing in my mind. Not everyone who comes here leaves, and I wonder, what does he mean? Why is he still with me, even when I'm miles away from the woods? I'm still running, but now I'm not sure if I'm running from the forest, or from myself. The night air was colder than usual, a biting chill that crept under my jacket and settled deep in my bones. I had always loved hiking through the forest, the tranquility of it, the feeling of being one with nature. It was a place where my mind could quiet itself and let go of the chaos that consumed it during the day. But tonight, something was different. The woods felt wrong. The trail had been quiet at first. The only sound was the crunch of dry leaves beneath my boots, the occasional call of a distant owl, the soft rustle of the wind in the trees. But now, as I pushed further into the forest, the usual comforting hum of nature had faded. The air was thick with silence. I couldn't even hear my breath, just the echo of my footsteps in the eerie stillness. I had been hiking for hours. The trail, which I'd walked countless times before, had grown unfamiliar. The trees seemed to grow closer, their gnarled branches stretching out like twisted fingers reaching for me. The path had become more treacherous, the ground uneven, and I found myself stumbling over rocks and roots more often than I cared to admit. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. I was alone, after all, and isolation can play tricks on the mind. But as I pressed on, the sensation grew stronger, more suffocating. I could feel eyes on the back of my neck, the hairs on my arms standing on end, my pulse quickening with each step. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing just behind me, but the path was empty. Still, I couldn't shake the sense that I wasn't alone. I pushed forward, telling myself it was nothing, just the dark playing tricks on my mind. The sun had long since set, leaving only a sliver of twilight in the sky. My headlamp was dim, the battery already beginning to die, and the shadows around me seemed to grow darker, thicker, as if the night itself was closing in. The trees no longer felt like a sanctuary, but a prison, trapping me in their endless maze of branches and roots. Then I heard it, a sound, faint at first, but unmistakable, a twig snapping. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Someone was out there. I strained my ears, listening for the telltale rustle of leaves, the crunch of footsteps on the ground, but all I heard was the wind. I forced myself to move, telling myself it was just an animal, maybe a deer or a bear. But my steps were quick, almost frantic. As I picked up the pace, I didn't look back. I couldn't. The sound had been too close, too deliberate. Someone or something was following me. The minutes stretched on, each one heavier than the last. My heart raced in my chest, thumping painfully against my ribs. I couldn't see what was behind me, but I knew it was there. The sound of the forest was gone, replaced by a suffocating silence, the kind that presses in on you from all sides and makes you feel like you're re-losing your mind. Then, the whisper came, soft at first, like a breath in the wind, but unmistakable. It was just behind me, just to the side of my ear, too faint to understand but enough to freeze me in place. "Run," the voice hissed. "You're not safe." My stomach dropped. I turned, but there was nothing there, just a dark path behind me, empty. Yet the feeling of being watched, hunted, was overwhelming. It was as if the forest itself had become alive, aware of my every move, every breath. I didn't know who or what was following me, but the chill in the air told me that it wasn't human. I started to run, my boots slammed against the trail, branches scratching at my face, my legs burning with the effort. The path seemed endless, a twisting, winding corridor that led deeper into the woods. I couldn't see anything ahead of me but the dim beam of my headlamp, but I didn't dare stop to look behind. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Run, run, run." The voice wasn't a whisper anymore, it was a scream, echoing through the trees, each syllable vibrating in my bones. My lungs were on fire, but I pushed forward. The darkness seemed to close in around me, suffocating, like the very trees were closing ranks, trapping me in their embrace. I could hear the sound now, the crunching of footsteps behind me, matching my pace. Whatever it was getting closer. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. A figure, standing in the shadow of a massive oak tree, watching me. It was tall, impossibly tall. Its body twisted in unnatural angles, like it didn't belong in the world. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes, if they could be called eyes, were black, hollow voids, sucking the light from around them. The thing didn't move, it just stared. My breath caught in my throat, and I stumbled. My headlamp flickered, then went out entirely, plunging me into complete darkness. I fumbled with the flashlight on my backpack, but my hands were shaking too badly to grip it. I could hear it now, the sound of breathing labored, ragged just behind me. I spun around, and there, standing at the edge of the path, was the figure. It was closer now, impossibly close. Its features distorted, its mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. I could see the gleam of teeth, sharp and jagged, like knives ready to tear into flesh. It moved, slowly at first, like it was savoring my fear, dragging its limbs across the ground, its feet never quite touching the earth. The air grew colder, and I could feel the weight of its presence pressing in on me. I could smell it now, an overpowering stench of decay, of something old and rotting, filling my nose and throat. "Run," it whispered. "You can't escape." Without thinking, I bolted again, my legs carrying me forward faster than they ever had before. I didn't care about the path anymore. I didn't care about the trees. All I wanted was to get away, to escape whatever this thing was. But the footsteps behind me were relentless, always just a few steps away, like it was playing with me, letting me think I might get away. I pushed through the underbrush, not caring that the branches clawed at my skin, not caring that the trail was disappearing beneath me. I just needed to get away. And then, finally, after what felt like hours, I broke free. The trees opened up into a small clearing, and there, at the edge of the woods, was my car. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I ran to the car, my fingers numb as I fumbled with the keys, my breath ragged in my chest. When the door finally clicked open, I dove in, locking it behind me, my heart hammering in my ears. I started the engine, my hands trembling as I gripped the wheel. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the forest beyond. But there was nothing. No figure. No movement. Just the endless stretch of trees and darkness. I drove away, my mind racing, my heart still in my throat. But as I turned the corner, a fleeting thought crossed my mind. The whispering hadn't stopped. I could still hear it, faint but persistent, echoing in my head. You can't escape. And I knew, deep down, that whatever I had just encountered in the woods was still out there, waiting, watching. It hadn't let me go. It wouldn't let me go. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Each of your stories adds another layer to our growing community of horror enthusiasts. And if you think someone else might enjoy a good scare, do you and forget to share this video with them. Stay tuned for more spine-chilling stories, and remember, sometimes the scariest tales are the ones that could happen to any of us. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next video if you dare.